This is what was being discussed. Now, what we also know in all of this is that the U.S. president has been speaking about trying to end the war in Gaza. He says he has been gravely concerned about the widespread famine that is occurring in Gaza on the part of the Palestinians, and that he says they are working on a solution in order to resolve this.
OK, thank you very much, Kimberly Halkett. We will be going back to you, checking in on whether we've heard from Donald Trump, the US president himself. Well, joining me now in the studio is Mehran Kamrava, Professor of Government at Georgetown University in Qatar. He also directs the Iranian Studies Unit at the Arab Center for Research and Policy Studies. We also have Sultan Barakat, Professor of Public Policy at Hamad bin Khalifa University. Thank you both very much for joining us today. Obviously, both residents here at the moment. It must have come as quite a shock. I don't know if you did hear the explosions, but it certainly was for us here in the newsroom.
Well, I did hear the explosions. I was actually having lunch with a senior German diplomat, which actually it comes to say that Doha is not just a place where Israelis are talking to the Palestinians. There are lots of other parallel talks taking place at the moment, and there are a lot of diplomats, lots of international representation in Doha. And for the Israelis to have the courage to undertake this attack is really puzzling. I mean, I don't understand what logic drives them to undertake this. They could have thought of 101 ways of assassinating Hamas's leaders in many different ways, as they did with Haniya in Iran, as they did with the others in Lebanon and Syria and so on. So I think there's a deeper message that they're trying to send to the world, and the world must respond accordingly, particularly the United States. I don't think it's sufficient that the United States now comes out and say, well, we knew nothing about it, or maybe we just learned afterwards. The United States sponsors Israel. They must own up to this responsibility and explain what is going on. And slowly, Israel is really driving itself against the wall. I mean, they're now becoming known as the pariah state around the world. It's the state that has done more criminal acts than any other state in the aftermath of the Second World War up to today. And they seem to be getting away with it. They think they're getting away with it. But I think really this is the last, if you like, event that is now going to start declaring globally a questioning of the state of Israel as we know it. It is acting more as an air-based aircraft carrier. You know, it's the way it is resolving its problems is very far from what you expect from a proper state in this region or globally.
Mr. Kamrava, we were talking there about the US. We have not heard from the president himself. This is a really interesting thing because Donald Trump has put pressure on Hamas, certainly in the last 24 hours, saying that they have to accept his new proposal. It's a very vague proposal. Israel has come out today, its foreign minister just earlier this morning, saying that it accepts the Trump proposal. Could Israel have carried such a brazen and unprecedented attack on a sovereign country in the Middle East like Qatar that is a mediator earlier in the war, perhaps even pre-Trump presidency?
No, I don't think so. I think what we're seeing is, as Sultan just said, is an evolution of Netanyahu's descent into insanity. I think he has this grandiose idea of wanting to redraw the map of the Middle East. He wants to remake the Middle East, at least geostrategically. And that's what we're seeing. In fact, earlier in the war, he waited until Haniya left Qatar and was in Iran and to assassinate him. And back then I was thinking he would never do such a thing in Qatar. And now we see that a year and a half on, he's far more brazen. Or you might say he's taken leave of his senses, and for his own political career, for his own vision of what he wants to see the Middle East, he's engaging in these kinds of brazen activities of attacking a country like Qatar, which is kind of against all political logic in many ways.
I just have to I just have to interrupt you there because we are going to the UN. Let's break in there. Antonio Guterres, the UN General Secretary, speaking.
The sovereignty and territorial integrity of Qatar. All parties must work towards achieving a permanent ceasefire, not destroying it. Today's breaking news underscores the importance of the report that we launched today. It lays bare a stark reality. The world is spending far more on waging war than on building peace. In 2024, global military spending surged to a record $2.7 trillion, the equivalent of $334 for every person on Earth. That is really 13 times the amount of official development assistance from the world's wealthiest nations and 750 times the regular budget of the United Nations. At the same time, our shared promise of sustainable development is in jeopardy. Only 1 in 5 Sustainable Development Goals targets is on track. The financing gap is growing, and so is the cost of inaction. Governments have legitimate security responsibilities, protecting civilians, safeguarding critical infrastructure, and addressing immediate threats. But lasting security cannot be achieved by military spending alone. My report, requested under the Pact for the Future, is a call to action.
Right, we just heard from the UN General Secretary Antonio Guterres there, of course, mentioning first thing the strike that's happened in Qatar and has condemned it. Are we surprised? Is that enough?
Of course not. I mean, this is why Israel feels emboldened. It's because of statements like this that keep coming again and again and again, where people don't draw a line and don't stand by the law. I mean, he's trying to promote a report that the UN has just launched about militarization and spending on military, and somehow waives the issue within this. It's nothing to do. This is fundamental infringement on state sovereignty. This is the building block of the United Nations. First thing he should have said, this is totally unacceptable. I condemn it with, to come in and just try to bring it out within a press conference is totally unacceptable. This is why Israel gets away with it all the time. And I suspect the American president will come out and do something similar. Now it is up to the Arab states to stand their ground. These missiles, for them to reach Qatar, have already crossed the sovereignty of a number of Arab states. There is a defense agreement, joint defense agreement for the Gulf states that should really now be enacted upon. They should take this extremely seriously.
Well, you mentioned the Arab states because we actually have had the diplomatic advisor to the UAE president talk about this attack. He's released a statement saying the security of the Arab Gulf states is indivisible, and we stand heart and soul with the Sicily state of Qatar, condemning the treacherous Israeli attack that targeted it and affirming our full solidarity with it in confronting this aggression. May God preserve Qatar, its leadership and people. May God preserve the Arab Gulf states. So another condemnation from an Arab country. We're yet to hear from the rest of the GCC, and of course, including other countries like Egypt, which neighbors the Gaza Strip. But how is, Palestinians certainly they feel very much let down by the international community, arguably even by regional leaders.
I think it's important to keep the larger contexts in mind. These Arab countries, like the UAE, for example, can condemn all they want. But we know, for example, that just recently a military plane went from the UAE with weapons to Israel. So I think actions speak differently. And now we've seen over the last hour or so that the Israeli Prime Minister's office is trying to absolve the United States. But we all know, for example, that Central Command is based here. America's biggest military base is here. How could the United States not know?
Exactly.
So, as Sultan mentioned, this attack was carried out with full complicity and knowledge of the Americans, and the implicit understanding of probably several Arab countries. Jordan intercepts Iranian missiles, but apparently Jordan didn't do anything. And so what we have is duplicity and hypocrisy that goes beyond Donald Trump. And it actually, we see it in our own neighborhood, in the United Arab Emirates, from Qatar's other supposed
friends. And it's important to mention that UAE, as well as Morocco, for example, have normalized relations with Israel. And that's exactly what Donald Trump has been pushing for, certainly in his first term. And that's what, you know, the conclusion from what Israel is saying is that it wants to be able to have relations with the rest of the region. But it's hard to see how, when it carries out attacks like this.
Well, I think this only pushes this idea of normalization, for example, with Saudi Arabia even further into the distant future. And so it'll be interesting to see how the Saudis react and how some of the other members of the GCC and countries like Jordan, as you mentioned, Egypt. But statements are one thing, and even if they're watered down by what Gutierrez just said. But I think we need to see concrete action. Obviously, Netanyahu is unhinged. Obviously, he's out of control. And he's being empowered by Donald Trump. He's being empowered by the United States. Does something tangible about it, I think we'll see more of these sorts of attacks.
Yes, of course. I will come back to the both of you. Thank you very much for speaking to us, Sultan Barakat and Mehran Kamrava. Don't go away, obviously. It's a breaking news story and a lot of information coming in, including the office of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu releasing a statement. In the statement, he says today's action against the top terrorist chieftains of Hamas was a wholly independent Israeli operation. Israel initiated it, Israel conducted it, and Israel takes full responsibility. Let's go to Yossi Mackelberg, a senior consulting fellow with the Middle East and North Africa program at Chatham House in London. Yossi, we were just talking here in the studio about whether the US has greenlit this. Of course, it has the biggest military base here in Qatar. Hamas is here because of a deal that involved Qatar, the US, and Israel. What do you make of this latest attack by Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu denying that the US had no involvement?
Hello, thank you for having me. I think Israel developed in the last 2 years a domestic internal conversation which is completely detached from the realities outside Israel, in which everything is permissible. There is no respect for international law, no respect for the sovereignty of other countries. And I must admit, when I heard this news, I was gobsmacked by the very idea that the country that was attacked, Qatar, is the one that negotiates a ceasefire deal. A government that keeps saying that the release of the hostages, not that many of us believe this government, and especially Netanyahu anymore, say it's a high priority for this government, and that's exactly taking an action that will derail something of this sort. It's also the case of the United States. Said about the agreement that brought Hamas to Doha. But beyond it, if the United States is complicit in this, and at least most people will believe that the United States is complicit, while it has a very important base and the relation with Qatar is so important, what is the future of the relations for the United States in Qatar and in the Gulf and beyond this, in the Middle East?
I'll just stop you there for a moment because we have heard from Saudi Arabia. Earlier I mentioned that we heard from the United Arab Emirates, one of the Gulf countries. We've now heard from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia condemning and denouncing, it says in the strongest terms, the brutal Israeli aggression and the flagrant violation of the sovereignty of the sisterly state of Qatar. Going back to what Israel is saying, now Israeli media, of course this isn't confirmed officially by the Israelis, but Israeli media is saying that 15 aircrafts participated in the attack dropping more than 10 bombs on a single target. An air-to-air refueling operation was also carried out. Very detailed there. Hamas has said that the leadership hasn't been killed. I want to go back to the agreement, the ceasefire proposal, rather, by Trump that's been put forward. Hamas says it was discussing it at the time of that attack. Israel, of course, hadn't responded to Hamas just before this when it accepted the previous proposal by Witkoff. Does this mean that Israel, for sure, has no intention of there being any form of ceasefire? And how is that going to go down by the Israeli public and certainly by the families of those that are still being held captive? And a reminder that the army chief himself wasn't so sure about this push into Gaza City.
I think the only conclusion we can reach that this government, and I think we knew it from before, but this attack in Doha today just re-emphasizes, underlines that this government has no interest in a deal. It has no interest in a ceasefire. It is not interest in the hostages. And the government, as you said, in difference from the Israeli military that had no interest and warned the cabinet when this decision to enter into Gaza City, warned that this is not what would serve Israel's interest in so many ways and put at risk the hostages, will involve, of course, with killing many Palestinian civilians, loss of life among Israeli soldiers, and we saw it only yesterday. But this government is keen on a never-ending war. That's what keeps Netanyahu in power. He doesn't want to end the war because this means an investigation into October 7 and what has happened since then. It can derail his corruption trial, and it will bring back and it will bring also back his corruption trial. So on this case, an election probably in a matter of months, this goes against Netanyahu's interest, and he will sacrifice the Israeli national interest for that. And in this case, will sacrifice a lot of lives on both sides.
Okay, thank you very much, Yossi Mekelberg, there on the situation there, the view from Israel. Now let's speak to our correspondent, Hind Khodari in Deir el-Balah in central Gaza. Hind, people in Gaza must be following this, of course, as Gaza City has been threatened by the Prime Minister, telling people to leave as soon as possible. We've seen high-rises bombed. What's the feeling now where you are, especially on there not being an end to the war, especially as it's trying to target Hamas?
Well, there's definitely a state of an anxiety, chaos, where Palestinians do not understand what happened and what was happening, and they do not know what happened with the negotiations team. Palestinians are still following the news, but amid all of this, there are buildings being targeted every single hour. We're talking about at least 7 buildings that were targeted earlier today with evacuation orders and calls by the Israeli forces. There has been also endless movement for Palestinians, where Palestinians are on the move, moving from a place to another. Palestinians were hoping that these negotiations are going to be successful, where they were hoping that there is going to be some light in the ongoing deal and the ongoing negotiations. But Palestinians now feel like they are also threatened, not only in their houses, in their land, but also the negotiation team is also threatened. The situation across the Gaza Strip is actually very, very dangerous right now. We're talking about endless evacuation orders, endless bombardment, and especially in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, the Israeli forces have been targeting high-rising buildings, towers, residential houses, and all of this is to push Palestinians to move to the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, and especially in al-Mawasi. Since the early hours of the morning, Palestinians woke up on leaflets telling them to move to that area, but Palestinians are refusing, and they're choosing to stay inside the Gaza Strip. Earlier today, there was also a protest held by Palestinians in one of the busiest streets in the Gaza city, and Palestinians were protesting and demanding and telling the world that they are not going to leave the Gaza city. And despite all the evacuation orders, despite all the intensifying bombardment, they're going to stay in the Gaza city. And we have been seeing women, men, children, everyone taking place and participating in that protest. Now, what we also need to know, yes, there are Palestinians on the move, and the situation is escalating as the Israeli forces continue to target residential houses, pushing Palestinians to move south. But at the same time, the majority of Palestinians remain in the Gaza city. Talking to Palestinians, they're saying that staying in their land and resisting all of these leaflets, all of these evacuations orders are a way Palestinians are resisting this occupation and the lethal force that is being used against Palestinians. Also, there has been also a Palestinian family that was killed, and we're talking about dozens of Palestinians still trapped under the rubble. And due to the intensifying bombardment and civil defense teams very, very busy with the ongoing targets, the civil defense teams were forced to leave those Palestinians killed, trapped under the rubble, and trying to rescue more Palestinians. The bombardment continues, and Palestinians are left with zero options.
Okay, thank you very much, Hind Khodari. As you said there, left with not really any options in Gaza City, certainly across the Strip. Well, speaking just a few moments ago, the UN Secretary General has condemned the Israeli targeting of Hamas leadership in Doha. Let's take a listen.
We are just learning about the Israeli attacks in Qatar, a country that has been playing a very positive role to achieve a ceasefire and release of all hostages. I condemn this flagrant violation of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Qatar. All parties must work towards achieving a permanent ceasefire, not destroying it.
Let's go back to Kristen Salumi, who joins us now from the United Nations in New York. So hearing there from the UN Secretary General condemning this, what else do we know?
Yes, the Secretary General was very quick to react to the situation in Doha, Qatar, with this remark. He was very quick, as you heard just there, to condemn the attack as a flagrant violation of sovereignty and the territorial integrity of Qatar, whom he noted has played an integral role in the peace negotiations between Hamas and Israel. And this remark was made at a time when the General Assembly's 80th session is about to kick off, its opening day, at a time when the United Nations role in international affairs and ability to uphold international standards is being questioned. The Secretary General had been scheduled to give remarks today about military spending, and he actually used this opportunity to segue into a report that he's releasing calling for less spending on military and fighting worldwide and more money on investing in social structures and peace. It also comes at a time when UN peacekeeping funding is under threat. All of that expected to come up in the next month as world leaders gather here at the United Nations. But again, the distraction from the UN's role as an international mediator as conflicts like this that are, as he noted, in clear violation of international law continue, calling into question the UN's role in being able to uphold or advocate for any of that.
Of course, you just mentioned there, Kristen, about the 80th United Nations General Assembly meeting. Talk to us about what had happened when it came to revoking the visas for the Palestinian Authority members that are due to attend, and it being them discussing to move it to Brussels.
Yeah, well, this is another example of the UN's relevance and ability to handle tough international issues when a veto-wielding member of the Security Council is opposed to them. We know that the United States has announced that it will not give visas to the Palestinian delegation coming here to New York, or planning to come here for a high-level meeting on the two-state solution that's been called by Saudi Arabia and France. The United Nations has objected to this. It says it's against the agreement of the host country in hosting the United Nations here, but there's been no resolution. And I should point out that there is no plan to move that discussion to Geneva or any place else. It has been done in the past. It was done in the past. That has not been proposed here, perhaps, I'm told, because of the short time frame before the General Assembly does kick off. It's just a couple weeks away for the high-level week officially kicking off today. So again, a lot of questions being raised about the United Nations' ability to respond to these tough conflicts that are ongoing, particularly the one in Gaza.
Okay, thank you very much. That's the update there from Kristen Salumi in New York on the view from the UN. Let's speak to Hamda Salhout, again, who's been following all of the latest developments from Jordan's capital, because Israel has banned us as Al Jazeera from reporting there, as well as the occupied territories. Hamda, we have heard a statement there from the Prime Minister himself, Benjamin Netanyahu. We're also hearing reports, it seems, on how the operation was carried out. What more information do you have?
The Israeli Prime Minister's office confirming in a statement that Israel carried out this attack without any sort of assistance, essentially trying to absolve the United States of any involvement in this, given the incredibly sensitive nature of everything going on, with Qatar being an ally of the United States, but also Israel being an ally of the United States. So there are a lot of moving parts here with that. But nonetheless, Israeli officials have now published photos of the Israeli premier, along with his defense minister and other military chiefs at some sort of command headquarters, approving these strikes, looking at images as the Israeli authorities usually do when there is anything of this nature, any sort of large-scale attack or assassination that's happening. And it comes on the heels of just this morning, the Israelis calling for a full evacuation of all Palestinians from Gaza City, really upping the bombings and siege and bombardment in the entire vicinity in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, trying to forcibly displace millions of Palestinians as a result. But Israeli officials have also noted for the last nearly 2 years that they would reach Hamas leaders wherever it was they were, whatever country they were in. And Israel's far-reaching assassination attempts have been seen throughout this war for several leaders of several different groups in the Middle East. Israel has violated national sovereignty of so many different countries throughout the region just in the last 2 years. And of course, their rap sheet is quite long in the years prior to Israel's war on Gaza. But this time, what they're saying is that they are going to kill all of Hamas's leaders wherever they are. This is something they have been emphasizing for the last 2 years, and especially after the assassination of the former leader, Ismail Haniyeh, in the Iranian capital, Tehran. But it's worth mentioning that the country's defense minister came into his post in the middle of the war. The new army chief of staff also came to his post in the middle of this war. And that's because Netanyahu decided that something wasn't really working, that Israel was not achieving its military goals and objectives, which is true.